Okay, now this webinar is being live streamed. Hi, everyone. I apologize for the delay. We had a little bit of technical issues, but we're back and we'll make it worth, I promise. So today we're going to talk about some updates here in US immigration. We're going to talk about the new immigration actions to attract STEM professionals. This is going to be me, Lawani Ribeiro, and Chris Costa. We are both senior attorneys here at the visa team. Well, we're part of Jermond, and Jermond is a multidisciplinary firm that specializes in cross-border transactions. We have our legal, accounting, tax, and advisory services, our team of accountants and lawyers with experience and certifications to operate in the United States and Brazil, and much more. We have offices in Boston, New York, Miami, where Chris and I are located, Orlando, Sao Paulo, and Belo Horizonte. We count with 10 years of experience and more. We have over 3,000 clients that were served by our teams, and we have over 170 employees to serve you right now. Well, this is me. As I mentioned, I'm a senior associate here at Jermond for the past 3 years and a half, and I'm licensed to practice law both in Brazil and here in the United States, specifically in New York. And I want to introduce you to Chris Costa. He's also part of our team, and Chris will be explaining all the new legislation and regulation regarding the STEM professionals. We have an updated list. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of questions that are popping up about this. And let me tell you why Chris is the right person to explain that to us. So he's also a senior associate here at Jermond. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from Boston College and a JD from the City University of New York School of Law. He has over 7 years of experience in immigration and has extensive experience representing foreign national investors through both the immigration and business startup process, as well as representing multinational companies transferring and onboarding foreign national employees. So a lot of business immigration background, a lot of investment background, and we're very glad to have you and to have your help to clarify all these new regs. Well,
thank you.
We'll go. You're most welcome. So we have this agenda. We're going to go through USCIS updates on F-1 optional practical training, the famous OPT program. So what's new, what new categories are in after the executive power announced some actions kind of giving an incentive to STEM students, and also updates on J-1 exchange student programs. We're also going to talk about updates on O-1A visa policies, also regarding STEM professionals. Finally, we're going to also talk about a green card. So first, we're talking about student visa, which is temporary, J-1, which is also temporary, and mostly consular, O-1, which is already extraordinary ability. And there's so many myths involved when we say extraordinary ability, right, Chris? And finally, a pathway to a green card, which is the National Interest Waiver, the famous EB2 NIW. And stay tuned. We're also going to have a moment for Q&As, so you're going to be able to ask live all your questions and doubts, but we're going to go through all this. Before we get into our agenda, Chris, I wanted to say that this is a very great moment to U.S. immigration, right? Where we see the executive power coping with us and incentive, like bringing incentives to highly skilled professionals, and finally acknowledging the great benefit of having immigrants in this country, right? We come from a previous government that was not exactly pro immigration. And when we see these kind of upgrades or these updates where we can finally bring people with great knowledge involving green and renewable energy, all things that align with the US finally being in the Paris Agreement towards, green energy, renewable energy, and less pollution and all that. So do you see that this is kind of a result of this agenda that we saw during their campaign?
Yeah, definitely. I think once we go through everything, we'll see that the STEM OPT fields in particular kind of reflect the administration's priorities and society at large's at this point, as well as just an evolution in our higher education that is kind of resulting from students and society just being interested in furthering innovation and transforming certain fields for the betterment of society. So with emphasis on maybe climate, the environment, renewable energy, and also just big data and advanced computing as that field continues to grow and just permeates society. So it's definitely exciting. And like Lawani said, it's good that the administration is realizing that immigrants can be used to further national agenda. They can contribute significantly.
That's awesome. And let's get to the details. Let's start with USCIS's updates on F-1 optional practical training, the OPT program. What's new? Tell us a little bit.
So I guess what most people are going to notice is that the STEM OPT period increased. So from 24 months to 36 months, which is a pretty big deal. It allows F1 students additional time with, to be employed and maybe to be entered into the H-1B lottery, or as we'll discuss later, continue to develop their skills, their portfolios, their CVs in general, and possibly qualify for an O1 and, the end goal of a green card eventually.
Okay, so we already started with big news. So we have a whole year added to the OPT program to those with that are enrolled in STEM programs, right? And on top of that, tell us a little bit of what new fields have emerged and are now qualified as STEM.
So these fields can broadly be categorized as energy, environment, climate, and like higher tech computing. So they're hybrid fields. Higher education institutions are consistently looking at what students want to study and which courses might, I guess, add benefit to their programs. And they're consistently tailoring their curriculums, basically. And these additional fields reflect that, and they also reflect our nation's priorities. So these are the 22 fields here, and you'll see some, I guess, interesting ones. Anthrozoology, which I guess that's significantly important with all of the animals going extinct.
I apologize.
Oh, the scrolling. Yeah, so there are a lot of different fields here, and they can all be used for the greater good.
Right, so just a few notes for all of you listening. First, we have a translator who is here live, doing everything we're doing here in Portuguese for you. Second note is you're all going to get these PowerPoint slides. So we don't want to bore you going through all the 22 fields of study. So you're gonna get this list. Okay, so let's move forward. And continuing with the J1 exchange students program now. So what is it new for maybe trainees that are coming from other countries, and what's their new benefit here in the US?
So similar to STEM, the J1 program has, well, similar to OPT for STEM graduates, the J1 program has also been extended to 36 months for people, undergraduate and graduate students focusing on STEM research, training, and education. So also an extended period of time for these very talented young people to contribute their knowledge to US businesses that seek to host these J1 exchange students.
Okay, so we can consider that those new STEM fields would also be applicable here, right? So all these people working with the same type of research, with all that renewable energy type vibe, climate change, as you mentioned, with the extinction of many breeds and animals. So all these people would benefit from this and also have a fairly larger period here in the US for this training or participating in these companies and contributing with their work.
Exactly.
One moment. I'm going to go to the next slide.
I guess we'll note here, just continuing with J1, since we were on that slide, just that businesses have to be registered as a host organization. So if that's of interest to anybody who owns a business that might need J1 exchange students to perform any research, receive any training, or work with higher education in any way, then that's also something that we can facilitate.
Perfect. That's a great note. And so F visas, J visas, they are in a way very similar, promoting cultural exchange and so forth. But now we're going to get into something a little bit, let's say, deeper, a work visa per se, right? And let's talk a little bit about extraordinary visas. As I mentioned, there are many myths involved when we say extraordinary ability. People think of Nobel Prize, people think of these one-time achievements, right? And a lot of times they don't even think they could qualify. And right now we have this great opportunity. O1s are work visas. They can give you a lot of prestige here in the country. And please let us know what's new. I mean, what's the difference? What O1, which O1 categories are now somewhat in a bit of an evidence because of the need here in this country.
Mm-hmm. So what USCIS did was they revised their interpretation of the evidence that was already specified for the O1 to, I guess, conform the O1 to the reality of many STEM graduates and practitioners. So they specified that certain documentation would fit certain O1 criteria, where before, I guess, that wasn't exactly clear. So we've listed most of the examples here. For example, a doctoral dissertation award. Previously, academic awards generally did not count to satisfy criteria. Fellowships with certain organizations could satisfy being a member of a certain organization that required outstanding achievements, for purposes of satisfying an O1 criteria. Previously, if that had even been argumented, USCIS most likely, would have challenged that or denied it just based on, their guidance at the time, which didn't specify that, that would be applicable. Another significant thing is that USCIS has said that conference presentation awards may count towards criteria. They're also specifying that audio or video coverage of a beneficiary's work may count towards criteria before, that hadn't been taken into account. They only focused on written published work. So either work, published in a journal, a magazine, or, possibly media as well. So peer reviewer of government research funding programs counts as like judging the work of others, like within the capacity required for the field. That's also a very specific example that's that might be common in the STEM field. Something definitely very prestigious, but not something that USCIS previously would have thought or judged to fit the criteria just based on their understanding at the time, which didn't exactly fit the experience of many high-level STEM professionals. So this, these changes are definitely very, very overdue in a way, and they'll definitely make STEM professionals, they'll facilitate their qualification.
So basically what I see here is that we have some updated guidelines as to what the officers may consider as strong, good, relevant evidence to actually qualify these individuals, these professionals, as extraordinary professionals, as people that really meet the raise up to the 10% level in their field of work, right? So basically what we see here is something, a new basis for the officers to use as reference, right? Is that more or less what we're seeing?
Yeah, exactly. And taking into account startups as well. That's something else that I should mention. Previously they weren't exactly, their reality wasn't exactly taken into account. And now contributing intellectual property to startups, for example, can definitely satisfy an O1 criteria. So exactly, just reflecting the nature of the STEM experience.
Perfect. So immigration is finally acknowledging all these changes that have been going on for the past 10 years or whatnot, where you have angel investors investing in startups that are sometimes made out of one idea or one system or one procedure, right? That depends on that individual, and that individual has the knowledge, the original contribution, and a lot of times they wouldn't see the itinerary or what exactly they would be able to develop here, and now they're acknowledging all that and facilitating their coming to the U.S. Any more comments on this slide or
I guess I'll just close by mentioning that a founder appearing on a podcast can now satisfy an O1 criteria. If, it's a large podcast, discussing their work, previously that, that would have been a stretch, but now it's in the guidance provided to USCIS. You just have to prove that, this is a big podcast in the field, like all engineers listen to it. It's, it's informative. They're talking about, big things. So it's pretty big.
That's very good news. And I'm proud to say that here at Jermond, we always try to bring in all these things, and we've used this type of evidence in various of our cases and national interest waivers in the past. And I think that in a humble and small way, in a way, I feel we have contributed for them to see that these are the new reality, right? Okay, so we spoke about students, OPTs, we talked about J's, we talked about O's, and now pathway to the green card without a sponsor. That is amazing. That is what most of our leads are looking for, right? And the question that is resounding now to everyone is, what's new? What to expect? Are they making it easier to have a green card? Will the process be more speedy because you have the executive office backing this up? What changes do we see?
Well, I think a more speedy process is wishful thinking, unfortunately. But the fact that the executive office has specifically highlighted certain fields as being in the US's national interest is something very significant. Because first of all, I guess the National Interest Waiver petition can really be divided into two parts. So first, there's a personal qualification relating to the petitioner. So has this person contributed big things to the field? Does this person have X amount of experience? Do certain people who are big names in the field, do they consider this person special? Are they serving as references, to that effect? Does the person have a degree that's related to this, field that, kind of provides them that academic qualification? So I guess if people qualify on that basis, then there's the second part of whether what they expect to bring to the United States will further our national interest in some substantial way. And there's case law on that. There's like a certain test, but previously the federal government hadn't identified certain areas specifically in this manner that would actually satisfy that criteria, that just by nature of the petitioner being well qualified and special within that area, not just having a degree, but having contributed to that area in some way, in some distinctive way, would facilitate a petition. And the rationale is that these fields would further the US's competitive interest, would further the US's national security, would allow us to remain at the forefront of developing technology, and would allow us to retain our status as a leader in all ways, economic, military, technology, economy. All these things can kind of be tied together. And technology and science, let's say, or engineering and mathematics, so all the STEM fields together in some way can contribute to that. And these fields that are listed here have been designated as high priority fields. So people who have contributed to these fields in some way, and we'll kind of detail what maybe a timeline might look like, might be good candidates for a national interest waiver to continue their work in the United States.
That's very interesting. And I think for us, like actively working in this field, it's a great guidance, right? As you mentioned, it's not an easy task to prove that someone is of national interest. And when the government comes up with this whole project and research showing that these professionals will be of great importance to the nation, it kind of makes our life easier on proving what's the more subjective portion of an EB2 national interest waiver petition, right? So these are all very good news, interesting news. I think you've done a great job in updating us on the details. And could you kind of tie this up with a bit of examples of a bit of a trajectory, if we can imagine, I don't know, someone coming and wanting to benefit from these updates and upgrades of the legislation. How can you help us put this together in terms of examples?
Sure. Okay, I guess let's imagine a scenario here. Let's say a foreign national enrolls in a US master's program in bioenergy, a newly added STEM field. During their course of study, let's say at Boston College, they receive a fellowship in bioenergy. Subsequent to, well, a prestigious fellowship, one that would qualify for an O1 later. Subsequent to graduation, they enroll in OPT through their designated advisor. They obtain a training position at a bioenergy startup with an emphasis on wastewater treatment and renewable energy. Definitely a national priority at the moment, especially at the moment maybe where we're really questioning where our energy comes from and how to make it more efficient, how to innovate. This foreign national obtains 36 months of OPT. During this period of 36 months, this foreign national plays a critical role in developing new processes at this bioenergy startup. They contribute intellectual property to the startup. The startup continues growing, their reputation grows. The foreign nationals' work, which could even be in conjunction with others at the startup or others in the field, is published in a major journal in the field. The foreign national is invited to a nationally recognized conference, which which is published, nationally. The originality of the foreign national's work is cited in major journals in the field. This work is published in major online and audio publications. The foreign national is invited to conferences and receives an award for their presentation. The foreign national is invited by Boston College, let's say their alma mater, to review abstracts of papers submitted for presentation, for thesis purposes or for scholarly conference purposes, even externally, not within the educational institution. And so all this happens throughout the 36 months of OPT, let's say, subsequent to this foreign national's master's program. This foreign national meets with an immigration attorney and decides that they would like to continue in the United States. They would like to continue working for this startup beyond the 3 years because they're really just getting started here. There's a lot to do. This foreign national has already played a critical role and will continue to play a critical role. Let's say by this time they're already a senior researcher. Let's say 4 years has gone by. So at this time, the foreign national applies for an O1A visa as an individual with extraordinary ability in the sciences. They are approved for an O1 visa for an initial period of 3 years. So they obtain the O1, they have 3 years, they continue working. This technology continues developing. It begins, let's say it's used more and more throughout the country. It doesn't necessarily, have to, I guess, completely replace our wastewater treatment processes, but it's received substantial recognition as promising technology, even more so than than it already has because it's further along in its development. And
So you're saying someone bought that technology, or even the government has acknowledged it. So this person starts growing towards, I want to say, a national interest, right? They're elevating.
Exactly.
maybe.
Yeah, it could take either of those paths. There's basically it just things just have to continue evolving, and the foreign national would have a substantial amount of period for that to happen. They would have 6 years in O1A status. And let's say, similar to what many others do, a couple of years before that 6-year period expires, to begin looking at their options, for permanent residence, to continue their stay here in the United States. At that point, they can look into a national interest waiver.
Finally, without a sponsor, right? And all the previous paths, we needed someone, either the startup or some US-based company kind of sponsoring you and keeping you as your petitioner, right? But then when we upgrade it to a national interest waiver petition, we can finally have that person self-petition. Can I ask you a few things before we get to our Q&A? So does it make any difference in the scenario you depicted if this person is of certain nationalities or not?
For the national interest waiver, it does, just because visas may or may not be available for people of certain nationalities, particularly the Chinese and Indians, because they just have a larger population that's also well educated and very well represented in STEM. So, they sometimes visas are not available. It really depends on, availability at that time. And I guess something else to note is that national interest waivers cannot be premium processed. So they have a long processing time, which can definitely be over a year. So that's, something to take into consideration as well. And the trajectory is generally to obtain approval of the national interest waiver first, and then, solicit the green card. So it's a 2-step process that can't exactly be done simultaneously. So that's actually why I decided that it would be a good time for this fictitious foreign national to start 2 years before their status expired, assuming that they wouldn't have an interruption after expiration, that 2 years would be a sufficient period of time.
So you were being conservative and you were allowing the time, the proper time for USCIS to review the merits for this person without affecting their underlying status, and keeping them here, able to work and perform their job here, and actually continue to contribute with their talent or their exceptional abilities here. And even if, let's say, an RFE comes up, we have even more things to contribute to show this person's exceptional ability. That is great. Okay, so one of our first question comes from the audience, and she is asking you, Chris, if you could please discuss a little bit of green card options for H-1B visa holders. So someone who currently has an approved H-1B status and is completing an MBA in a STEM field, and how do they get in this dynamics? Like, what's new to them, and how do they benefit from this new ruling?
Okay, so I guess the traditional trajectory for people in H-1B is to go through PERM, which is where an employer tests the labor market. It's maybe more of a straightforward path. However, this fictitious path that we just detailed doesn't only apply to people that go from F1 or J1 to O to National Interest Waiver. It can also apply to people in H-1B or any other non-immigrant status. So if this person is currently enrolled in an MBA with a concentration in STEM, maybe depending on what exactly their concentration is, if it relates to one of these identified fields, they would have a pretty straightforward path towards a national interest waiver, depending on their CV, depending on what they've done so far, what evidence that they can submit, and how they plan to use their studies. Because at this point, maybe the studies aren't exactly connected to their current experience or their current experience basically, or previous experience.
Okay, so it can apply to them. We would just need to maybe invite this person to a conversation and see what exactly this STEM-related master's, what's the field that it specializes in or focuses in, and we could check if it includes any critical and emerging technology, which is like kind of the key phrase, key sentence to tie this person to this specific field here. That includes new STEM fields and courses. Okay, let me see. We have a few more questions. Let me continue reading. So she clarified it's data science.
Okay, so I guess the same analysis applies. What have you done in data science to date? How do you plan on using your degree? What exactly can you contribute, basically, in detail. So, it's everything is subjective, but data science is definitely a field that's in demand, that's identified as a national priority. But, obviously there's a lot that can be done within data science as well. So, this is a larger conversation.
Okay, so I guess you did such a great job in explaining that. That was the question we had. It is very relevant to mention that we are very happy to talk to you about your case and clarify any more doubts, specific doubts you may have on any of what was mentioned here. I want to reinforce that you will be receiving the PowerPoint. So this is our contact information. That's me, that's Chris. See, ladies first always. And Chris, do you want to add anything to our guests?
Well, I see another question here. Would a master's in IT and a solid business plan be enough for a national interest waiver to be approved? Is it necessary to create a formal company, make investments, etc.? Okay, so I guess what exactly do I have to show that I'm well positioned, to advance this this field basically in the United States? That's a little subjective, but generally people that are just exiting a degree program haven't shown accomplishments yet, to show that they're well positioned. Those people oftentimes apply for an O1 first. But it is a little relative. Oftentimes people have a lot of work experience previously. They've done a lot, during their studies. So it's kind of a subjective, evaluation. This person did mention a business plan. So, it really comes down to whether USCIS believes that this business plan can come to fruition within a short period of time as well. And, that this person has the skills and will be capable of putting this into practice, basically, more so than maybe your average person, with this degree as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. I think the question just popped up right that second, and it came from YouTube. So it came from a different channel, so I apologize, but thank you so much for answering. I hope that was answered, that the person felt was everything was dealt with here. At this time, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. It is always a pleasure to bring in new topics and to discuss immigration, which is our great day-to-day here and what we love. So please keep tuned. This will be recorded on YouTube. So if you want to forward that to colleagues and other people that are also interested in the field, that would be great. Thank you and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
Bye.